Welcome to Grand Farmer, the podcast where we bring together growers and members of the ag tech community to discuss the latest advancements in technology and their impact on agriculture. Hosted by Grand Farm, this podcast explores the ways in which technology is changing the world of agriculture from the perspective of those who are in the fields and in the tractors every day. In this episode, we hear from Bart and Quinn discussing the future of indoor farming. We hope you enjoy their conversation and gain insight in their discussion.
Well, thanks guys for having me. I'll always appreciate Grand Farm Emerging Prairie. Y'all are amazing. So my name's Bart Womack. I'm the founder and CEO of Eden Grow Systems. What we do at Eden Grow Systems is we take the most advanced next generation farming technologies and we make them easy and accessible for people to use. What we like to say is we make indoor farming simple and affordable.
Awesome. My name is Quinn Renfandt. I am on the Grand Farm Grow Advisory Board. I'm also the sitting president for the Red River Harvest Cooperative, kind of an online farmers market, so to speak, operating out of the Fargo-Moorhead area. And then I also have my own farming operation just south of Minot, North Dakota, and have been working in controlled environment, agriculture, aquaponic and hydroponic production for the past couple of years, give or take. Bart, nice to be on a call with you again. I haven't had a chance to sit down with you in almost, year and a half, give or take?
Yeah, I think the last time we hung out was when we were up at the Farmers in Space conference that Grand Farm put together.
Yeah, it would be that. That was last year?
Yeah, that was when I first got exposed to the pleasant abnormalities of Fargo's weather.
That's a really nice way to put that. Well, this time of year, it's extremely cold, and that kind of roots out a lot of people, but definitely for the farmers' sake, gives us time to sit down and think about what we're doing and how we want to do it better. But
well,
yeah,
I've never experienced cold that you're not cold, like whatever part of your body is exposed just immediately starts to feel pain. So that was really a kind of new experience for me, that there is no cold. It just goes straight to feeling like someone slapped you.
Yeah, that's how I know you're alive, though. So that's the good stuff.
That's true.
It's all of 8 degrees up here in Minot today. I know Fargo's a little bit colder, and I think we're going through a mild cold spell at the moment. But overall, winter's been pretty fantastic. I can't complain, to be honest.
So, it's interesting. I'm really watching and waiting to see what's going to happen with this winter. So I'm not even gonna attempt to say the name because I keep brutalizing it. But there was a volcano in the southern hemisphere. My brain keeps wanting to call it tonkatsu, but that's actually like pork ramen. So it's a very similar name to that. Again, forgive me. But there was this huge eruption and it put more water vapor into the atmosphere than we've seen in something like 170 years. And so last time that this happened, when a volcano in the southern hemisphere put this much water vapor into the atmosphere, about a year and 2 months later, the water vapor gets into the atmosphere and it caused what was known as a year without a summer. Now, what's really interesting about that, just to throw in a little bit of Paul Harvey, the rest of the story, is that the Farmer's Almanac in the U.S. was a regional publication that was just getting going in the 1850s, and it really was not getting a lot of support. But in it, based on cycles in the sun and some formula that the Farmer's Almanac has actually kept secret since that time, they predicted that there would be snowstorms in the Midwest in July. And everybody saw this and just completely laughed at it. I was like, that's ridiculous. There's never been a snowstorm in the Midwest in July. And lo and behold, there was a snowstorm in the Midwest in July. Because what happens whenever these volcanic eruptions happen, what happened in that period and what's predicted to happen now, is that water vapor gets up into the atmosphere and it causes global cooling. That you have the temperature drop and you end up having, it's not that winter stays until summer, but it's that you have cold snaps. So it might be 80 degrees one day in the Midwest and then a front blows through. And you guys are kind of used to this. And when I was up in the Yukon, I experienced this as well, where it will be an 80-degree day and a front will blow through and it'll be snowing for like 2 or 3 hours, and then it blows back out and it's done. Well, as you can imagine, for large scale agricultural production, this is like devastating. For a freeze to happen in the middle of your grow season, it can wipe out huge sections of your plants. So what the prediction based on what happened in the 1800s, when you have this kind of large scale water vapor injected into the atmosphere, is a year and 2 months later, you start having, during the winter, huge cold fronts, massive precipitation, totally abnormal winter that holds on way longer than what it normally does. And then you continue to have these little cold fronts, not little, but cold front snaps, then even throughout the rest of the growing year that come in. And it really wreaks havoc with growth cycles and crop production. So I'm really interested right now to see if this plays out, because the timing of when the eruption happened, a year and 2 months, is February. And so starting now and in February, if the model holds true of what happened last time, we should see some pretty significant cold weather events really drop everything in the Northern Hemisphere to pretty brutal lows. So were you aware of any of that, Quinn, or did I just drop all that on you?
Well, I was not following the specific volcanic eruption that happened recently, but I am aware of the connectivity of our global atmospheric conditions and how one event can trigger something like what you're talking about, and that has happened in history, which I think is a great segue into kind of what we're talking about here with both the product that Eden Grow System has unveiled and kind of my background in controlled environment agriculture, one of which being the argument of the volatility of our climate, specifically up here in North Dakota, and why I believe that if you can afford it, you should have some type of controlled environment for producing your food that is both resource friendly and mindful of the fact that you have these global events that will influence and continue to influence things of the nature, like you're saying, yields and all those things.
That's awesome. Actually, yeah, I just looked it up. It was the Tonga. That's why I keep saying tonkatsu. It's the Tonga eruption blasted unprecedented amount of water vapor into the stratosphere. I'm on NASA right now, and they actually have a really cool animation showing the eruption happening from satellite imagery. And then it goes into just talking about, we've never seen anything like it, says Louis Milan, an atmospheric scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He led a new examination, the amount of water vapor that the Tonga volcano injected into the stratosphere. And it's saying when the Tonga Ha'api volcano erupted on January 15th last year, it sent a tsunami racing around the world and set off a sonic boom that circled the globe twice. The underwater eruption in the South Pacific Ocean also blasted an enormous plume of water vapor into our stratosphere, enough to fill more than 58,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. The sheer amount of water vapor could be enough to temporarily affect global average temperature.
I do remember this now. Yes, I looked it up and it was January of last year. So yes, I do remember this happening. That was a big deal.
It is. It's like, what people don't understand is that we've been living in the most stable climate period that we can see in like Earth's history for the last 20 to 50,000 years. When you hear like people talk about in all these like ancient societies about the gods, just being brutal and vicious, it was because weather events were so much more significant than the period that we've lived in. I mean, you can read about in the Middle Ages there being hailstorms in Europe where it would come through and there would be hail dropping on a city for a couple of days with like, baseball up to basketball sized chunks of ice. The city would just be gone afterwards. Everything just leveled from these storms. And so that's where in our ancient memory, we kind of get this thing of like talking about like the gods being, angry and then coming in with weather and lightning and storms and thunder and just destroying everything. And so we've all grown up in this like super stable period, very warm. It's almost Game of Thrones-ish, that where they talk about the summer and the winter and these periods where, it's a long summer and that means everything's good. And then winter is coming and that means, everything's going to be a lot harder. when you look back in the the geological record, you can actually correlate significant weather shifts with the fall of empires.
Absolutely.
Fall of the Roman Empire, fall of Chinese Empire. And so now, like right on schedule, what all the geological models which link to the sun, and again, I always hate this divide when you start talking about climate change, that people just demand that you kind of conform to one view or the other, when honestly, if you look at all sides have very valid points. Humans are directly affecting the environment, okay? We are poisoning the oceans. We're dumping nitrogen into the oceans. It's causing huge dead zones. We're definitely not managing the planet the way that we should be. But on the other side of that, there is also this truth that cycles in the sun can be directly correlated in the geological record with seeing how these cycles have affected crop outputs throughout time. And so, then you can go and you can find the monks in medieval Europe cataloging weather. You can go back, and the Chinese have been cataloging weather for something like 5,000 or 6,000 years with very accurate. So you take all that data and you put it all together, and you really do get this picture. And that was honestly why I got so hot on indoor agriculture, next generation farming, was because I started doing research on this in 2012, and I kept coming across all these data points that the climate was going to change. It was going to become more unstable. And then there were also these political, economic, societal data points that you could look at as well about how we were managing our resources and the carrying load of the planet. And you put all that together, and it became very obvious to me that this system that we've enjoyed our entire lives wasn't going to be able to continue to function the way that it has functioned, and that really the future was going to be centered around people like yourself that would see that and would start taking the technology. And in the beginning, as the old system became less and less functional, there's this trade-off point, which I think inflection point that we are reaching now, where small operations like yours are going to increasingly become not just successful, but vital, like absolutely vital.
Absolutely.
And it's like, but it was hard. It was hard because for us to be at where Eden's at as a company and where you're at as a local grower right now, it really took some vision starting, 5 years ago for me, the research 10 years ago, but 5 years ago, really trying to figure out solutions and saying, no, we see a problem. We're going to put ourselves upstream of that problem to develop solutions. So when the problem becomes significant, we actually have solutions that can be brought in a timely and effective manner. And so I do think that we're getting very, very close. I think the pricing on a lot of food this year is really going to start pushing people over the edge and pushing society over the edge to really start implementing kind of these new and innovative solutions. What do you, any opinion on that?
Well, I think you've talked about a lot of these things in the past, and you and I have rabbit holed about the ways the food system, the effects that has on, global stability, both politically and from just the overall civilization that we've come to know. And my argument is always, well, it's easier to change when times are good than trying to be so reactive when times are bad. And that kind of brings me full circle to what you just said about stepping up and trying to decide what I'm going to do about this and what I can do in my own means. And that, for me, was building out a farming operation that hopefully is an example for the future. And when I say the future, I don't know how far into the future, because that's also the biggest question, is how fast will these things come to light in our immediate horizon of everyone's everyday life. But what I know is that by choosing to just take the lead and do something within my own capacity, that in itself is what I'm trying to say to others is, look, find a way that you can tactile affect your own reality. And for that, for me, was building out a greenhouse operation that is hopefully at some point giving myself food independence. And I know that with Eden Grow Systems, that's one of the major reasons that this product exists. And I think that's especially where we cross paths.
Well, and I wanted to touch on that. Whenever you and I were first speaking, I kind of saw that there weren't, and we ran into this where we saw a lot of growers that are doing outside growing saying, well, why do I want to use your system? I'm doing more, just traditional in the ground planting. And what we've seen now with some of the experiments that they've been doing at the Grow Annex at A&M up in Dallas, they have this huge indoor greenhouse grow annex that they actually do all of their experimentation in, is that Professor Joe up there, he was taking our system, and he was explaining that using his multi-million-dollar greenhouse, normally over the winter, he's able to get maybe 40 or 60 sweet potato plants started because of how much space each plant takes. And he can then, after the first freeze, plant those plants in the ground and get his sweet potato plant production going very quickly. Well, with our tower, he's saying he's going to be able to do between 400 and 600 starts in a much smaller footprint. And then when we talk to like HISD and their growers, they're going to do the same thing, buying towers to just do tomato plants. And so when the first freeze happens, instead of just taking little seedlings or planting seeds in the ground, they've been growing the whole winter. They have 3 or 4 month mature plants. So they're able to put those plants in the ground after the first freeze, know that they're going to have a higher level of plants surviving, producing earlier in the season, and they start another round of plants in the tower. So in case of a flood or a freeze comes in and wipes out half their crop, they have another round of mature plants that they can put in. So I'm really starting to see a use case for our tower to where it's not necessarily, even though it can be utilized to do a massive indoor grow system that you can start at any level that you want, whether it's 1 tower, 50 towers, 1,000 towers. Now there's that use case for the person that just has a garden in their backyard, for the person that's maybe doing, a couple of acres of planting and just wants to make sure that they're taking their plants, because you can start things in starter trays, but that's only going to get you to, the first couple of weeks of sprouting. With our system, you can have a plant that's 3 or 4 months mature, is on the verge of, like if it's tomatoes or peppers, being ready to really start producing, and you're putting that in the ground. So what are your thoughts on that?
I'd love to try that out and test it out, because I know when you're taking a plant from a controlled environment, specifically aeroponics, where you're giving them a nutrient solution that they have everything they need, there's going to be some type of shock when you're going to outside, depending on your soil health and how experienced that particular grower is. But that is enticing for sure. And I think a much better way to get things going is in an environment like that. And I've looked at similar technologies, propagation trays, yada, yada, yada. So I'm familiar with the concept, and I would love to know more about how well that's working out for them.
So far, it's been working out really good, because with aeroponics, the root structure actually develops out more and becomes more robust. And we have done experiments where we've transferred from the towers into the soil. And you are right that you need to make sure that if you're fertilizing, or whether it's organic or non-organic, that the plants are going to get their nutrient requirement at that point. But other than making sure that they get their nutrient requirement, so far what we've seen is the transfer happens very smoothly, again, because the root structure is so robust.
So Bart, let me ask you this. With the customers that you've had thus far, have you noticed a trend, whether they be more experienced or looking for the automation? Like what have you seen from your customer base?
I'm really seeing, and what I thought for a while, is that it's institutions that are going to be our primary customers, because where it makes the most sense for communities to organize is around the institutions like community service centers, schools, and churches. And that's where you also get the economy of scale. Not most people have 50,000, 1 tower is cool. And 1 tower, like I said, if you have a garden, it's great. So I'm not going to say it's a novelty anymore, but it really is. If you're using the towers to be your main growing vector, you really have to start with 5, 10 towers to be producing anything that's significant enough to really impact your life. If you're trying to be a commercial grower, you're really talking about an entry point of 50 to 100 towers. Now, with a price point, starting between 3,000 and 5,000, let's just take the median of 4,000. $4,000 per tower to have any kind of significant operation, you're looking at a $20,000 investment just to impact your life, and if you're trying to do a real commercial operation, You're looking at what, 4,000 times 50, it's $200,000 or $400,000. Most individuals don't have that kind of capital, but organizations, churches, schools, community organizations, hospitals, they all have that kind of budget. So what I've been seeing is, like, when we go to academic institutions, when we go to school boards, when we go to PTOs, when we go to church boards, when we go to parishes and are able to communicate with them, they see the value, they can organize, and they can deploy resources and actually get something going. So I think right now what I'm seeing is it's really community level organizations. I think that as we move into the future and food becomes ever more critical, I believe that you're just going to continue to see communities organize. Of course, there'll be, the wealthy that'll have their private plantations. And I mean, and if you look throughout history, that's how things have always worked. Okay, the wealthy have always had farms. Yeah. And that was actually a sign of, if you had enough money to be wealthy, you had a farm, because you knew that the greatest equator of your wealth wasn't in gold, wasn't in silver, wasn't in money, it's in food. The capacity to take care of yourself has always been at the core of wealth. It's only in the modern era where we institutionalized and vertically integrated food production so much that people became disconnected from that. That system, as it continues to break down and is going to force prices up and force more regional growers anyway, you'll see the wealthy begin to build out their, plantations. But then what I predict is you're going to see communities through companies like Eden, and I'll explain it, even further. One of the things that we're working on with Eden that I tasked our teams with in the last 3 months and that they're building is, I said, look, the same way that we've built and made simple to use the technology and the mechanisms for this next generation farming, now we have to start making it simple and easy for communities to self-organize. So what we've been doing now is we've been putting together packets that one is a church packet, one is a school packet, one is a community packet, one is a community commercial packet. And each packet literally spells out from A to Z how, and it has the promotional materials, has everything inside of it, where literally you just have to put in your organization, your name, and then you can start GoFundMes and Kickstarters so that your church group, your school group, your community group can self-organize. And that is what I predict we're going to see moving into the future. Whatever food crises continue to develop, which we can already see accelerating, that's just going to force people into new solutions. So the quicker we can get those solutions prepackaged, whether it's in the technology or the capability for them to organize, the faster they will be able to react to this changing world.
Yeah, Bart, I think that's fantastic. And you said so many things that I agree with. It's insane. I think that's fascinating that you're seeing that trend, and you're right about the financial side of things and the application of a product like this being more relevant to that higher end purchaser. And my initial question was from an experience level, what you're witnessing. So my next question is, from the motivation for these organizations and individuals to purchase Tower with Eden, do you see that understanding of that future that we keep referencing? Is that a major factor, or are they looking
it's all about
the convenience of wanting to get it?
It's all about framing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun. It's all about framing. People can, see their grocery bills going up. Organizations can see their, food procurement bills going up. There's definitely, Eden isn't the only company. I mean, you can see everywhere. There's kind of the same way, I'll show my age, that when computers and the tech revolution was really accelerating at the end of the 90s, all of a sudden, everywhere you went, there was a new, web startup, computer startup, internet startup. And so that was the trend of that beginning of the information revolution. I think we're at the beginning of a food revolution. I think that's why you see guys like Bill Gates buying up farmland, why you see Bezos and Gates investing in, cricket meal and bug paste to feed people, is because they definitely understand this trend in food is coming. And so, what I always tell investors is, I say the difference between millionaires and billionaires is this: the millionaire is the guy that can tell you whether or not your company is going to make money. the billionaire is the one that creates a company 10 years before it's going to make money. That's how you make businesses that can be radically successful. So again, it comes back to framing. I think that people are definitely aware and becoming more and more motivated to, finding solutions. What I find is, as a person that's out here proselytizing this message, is that really it's, like I said, it's about framing. Whenever like yesterday, I met with HISD superintendent, the number 3 person at USDA, and every department in HISD that had anything to do with food. Everything from the cafeteria lady to the accounting to their farming program to their STEM program, all in one room. And anytime I get a group like that together, all I have to do is say, look, we have a real choice here. The food production system is failing. We can either live in a future where we've centralized everything. Amazon and Walmart are delivering your cricket paste and your bug meal via drone that lands at your doorstep and offloads it to you. And everything can be centralized, vertically integrated for maximized profit to Amazon and Walmart. Or we can create decentralized systems at the community level that will empower the community, are more environmentally friendly, more food secure, and oh, by the way, we can keep all of the profits from those grow operations in the community. So that money is going back into the community instead of, Walmart and Amazon. And is this some hate session on Walmart and Amazon? No, we use Walmart and Amazon. I'm just saying that in the future, in the progression of things, we have to make a choice of either creating centralized systems or decentralized systems. And when you break down and examine all of the benefits, again, whether it's environmental, ecological, societal, cultural, food security, all of them fall on one side. It isn't like they're even split up between the two. It all falls on one side. So we can either choose to live in the future where it's this dystopian, total control, drones flying, delivering our food, and there's a great graphic I have that shows that. It's like on one half of the graphic, it shows, Brave New World, Blade Runner future. And then on the other side, it's the same city, but the same city with trees and growing systems literally growing out of every surface. And that's why we call the company Eden, is because the vision that we're trying to create is that vision of what I call, there's the cyberpunk. And on the other side of the cyberpunk is the solar symphony. The solar symphony is the bright future where we're able to leverage these technologies, again, creating prosperous, environmentally friendly systems, or we can go the other way. And once you really kind of nakedly put the choice in front of people and explain it to them in that context, that really, and that's what I always say, that, it's the great question of our time. And food is at the center of that question. Will technology be utilized to empower humans, or will technology be utilized to vertically integrate them and control them? And once you frame it in that way, I haven't met a person yet that's told me that they want to live in future A. Everyone wants to live in future B. And so once you explain to them that's the vision, and that it's not a feel-good bullshit path to that vision, that we actually have the technology that we can show is being implemented all over the world and here right now, that we do have a pathway to that future if we choose to take it.
Absolutely.
So to answer your question, it's all about framing. Once they're exposed to the idea of which one they want, I have not met a person that didn't choose the second option.
I think outside of this conversation, we need to follow up because I have had some contacts in the far remote area looking to do some community organizing within the controlled environment sphere and looking for technologies to incorporate. And I think the messaging behind what you're saying there is very valid and would apply to that. But on a separate note, I kind of want to ask, so I know from the get-go, and correct me if I'm wrong if this is still part of Eden's plan, but having, that artificial intelligence be kind of the experienced grower that's available for those that aren't as experienced. How have you seen that develop? And kind of speaking to the future of what's possible and not possible, what are your thoughts on AI and what it means to be involved in the food side of things?
I think it's brilliant. I think it's a brilliant integrator. The AI, when you pair it with camera systems can see things and flaws in the plants before we will ever know. The AI and the app that's attached to our systems is designed for the idea behind giving systems to people that have zero understanding of how anything works. And so while the AI and the app is designed to tell them everything to do and when to do it, it's also designed to be educating them through that process. And then on top of that, honestly, I'm not going to say we've gotten there yet, but a huge component of what I see in Eden's future is that everything that we build, I build around the idea of utilizing the most advanced technology to accomplish things in the simplest and most effective way possible. Okay, so we never overburden ourselves by getting ahead of what the technology can do, because we're about what it can practically do. But on the other side of that equation, I actually have always told our engineers and designers that we always have to be constructing everything so that they're analog backups, because our system is a survival system. And I always approach it from the idea, if you're off alone in Fargo, out in the middle of nowhere, or on Mars, or anywhere that you're cut off and you're expecting these systems to work, what happens if the power grid goes down? What happens if there's a cyber attack and all, computer systems fail? We have to have redundancy built into everything from an analog component that the system can continue to operate, which means that in the future, what I envision is when people get the system, it will be wired to where it doesn't have to connect to the internet to continue to operate. So that solves one problem, that the knowledge base of everything that the AI and the app is going to tell you to do can continue to function whether or not it's connected into our cloud servers or not. But secondarily to that, what I've always envisioned is the same app tree that basically the AI tells you what to do. Obviously, if the AI goes down, the monitoring system is gone. So you would lose that functionality. But I wanted to make sure that the roadmap of how to grow, what to grow, when to do it would still be laid out and functional, so that if you were having to operate the system completely analog in a whatever kind of world situation that was, that you would be able to continue operating it. And that's one of the things that I'm very proud about at Eden, is we have really, and that's why we took aeroponics. No one else in the industry wanted to work with aeroponics, because while it's super effective and the most effective way of growing anything, if for any reason there's an interruption in that system, the plants begin to die almost immediately. So the truth about aeroponics is everybody can build an aeroponics system. It's about building the resiliency and the backups into the system so that if the system has any kind of interruption, it will continue to operate and all your plants won't die. So that's kind of, I hope I answered your question. That's kind of my thoughts on AI. Very good. Totally should be integrated. We are integrating it. Huge component. But we also have to have backups ready that if all that goes away, the system still has value and it's not just a giant hunk of metal sitting on your farm.
Yeah, absolutely, Bart. I mean, that's one of the things that I definitely loved when I first heard everything you had to say about Eden, was that philosophy of having both in place. And that's something I've incorporated to everything that I do, both on my farm and the co-op, and almost pretty much everything in my life, where I think about that, like how technology can improve it. And especially in the business environment, there's a lot of advantages for overcoming the cost of labor. Like you were saying, monitoring crop health, great. But we also got to think about what happens if that shuts off, in not necessarily an apocalyptic sense, but just having the functionality to be able to operate independently of technology, and making sure the systems that are designed aren't so complex that you can't do it in an analog way. And I say that with the cooperative right now, we have an organization that is looking at the technologies we can incorporate to be competitive with the existing food dynamic that is the grocery world, but also as a group of producers and working together, making sure that we can operate outside of that too, to still achieve our goals. So yeah, absolutely. And I guess the other.
Well, and I mean, as someone, you grow plants. I mean, it doesn't have to be the apocalypse. I mean, the power can go out for a couple of days, and in an aeroponic scenario, you can be screwed. I mean, at 24 hours, what I've seen is if the aeroponic system goes down, depending on the plant, but within 24 hours, if you have not got that system back up and running in 24 hours, you've lost your plants. They're gone. Absolutely. And I mean, and when you're growing something for 6 months, and just waiting. And I mean, imagine if, you're having to survive on that. And then all of a sudden you lose battery power in 6 months worth of work and effort and waiting, even if it's small, still you were expecting that. So, you just, to me, yes, grid down everywhere. That's what we all think about, but I mean, like we lost power here the other week. And if I hadn't had a battery backup in the tower, I would have lost my plans. So again, it's just about building in those resiliencies. It doesn't have to be an end of the world event. It can be something as simple as a breaker getting blown while you're out at work, and then you come home and your plants are dead. So it's just about building those resiliencies in.
Yeah, absolutely. The other side of AI that I was going to ask is, in your experience, have you witnessed or had any feedback from, the fear that's associated with AI, and whether that be the fear of a new technology or specifically what people believe AI could do in, a mental capacity in comparison to a human, but in this realm, with it being so intimately tied to food, has anyone ever expressed any fear of that technology?
No, because again, the AI is going to look. This goes to the heart of the question about AI, and it's become a hot topic, and I've been thinking about it as well because of the Chat GPT thing,
Mm-hmm.
And at the core of AI, I think, of the whole AI question and debate is this, and it actually goes beyond AI and goes to our society as a whole. AI should be utilized as a force multiplier, but it should never be utilized as a replacement. Okay, so in farming, our farmers need to understand what's going on. But the AI can be leveraged to see things and react to things faster and at a wider scale than the individual farmer can. So I look at it in the farming sector, as long as we don't completely offload the thinking to AI, and then that becomes the same thing for everything. There was a Star Trek episode where they lived in a future where they lived on a planet, and there was a master computer that controlled everything and did everything for everybody. But the people were like children. They didn't understand anymore how anything worked. And so literally the computer started breaking down, and they didn't know how to fix the computer. And they became like a Stone Age civilization again, because they had to start from scratch and learn everything to build back up to the point of building the computer.
Yes.
So that's one of the biggest obstacles we face in this generation of technology is I heard Tim Pool talking about on his podcast a while back, that there was a guy that they tried to have build a toaster who was an engineer, and they were like, go build a toaster. And he couldn't build a toaster because it required too many different components from too many different places that he didn't have access to. And so it's the same thing, like these phones were on, the computers were on, we wind up in a future where nobody knows how they work anymore because they've offloaded that to machines that can do it better and more efficiently for them. I'll even tell you another one that I love talking about that goes to the nature of implants, which would also kind of go to your question. There was an Outer Limits episode that I watched in the 90s with the actor that was Doogie Howser before he really became famous. It was like, after Doogie Howser, he really didn't have a career for like 10 years.
Yep.
And he was just desperate to get anything. And so he was on this late night horror show, The Outer Limits. And in it, he's in the future, and everyone in the future has an implant that has them all connected to the web, and they can order food, they can send messages to each other. I mean, just all of the functionality of your phone and your computer, but in your brain. All right. And this guy, because of a accident when he was young, his brain can't interface with that. So the whole story is really fascinating. He's super insecure, and he spends all of his time reading. The guy is like obsessed with learning everything so that he won't be the one idiot that can't access the wealth of human information. And it's no matter how hard he tries, he can't ever catch up. Okay. Well, in this story, this computer virus strikes civilization and wipes out everything. And the end of the story is him sitting in an auditorium like the Astrodome, teaching people how to read. Because they didn't even know how to read, because the computer would just tell them what it was saying. So the last scene is literally him spelling the word cat in a room with like 50,000 people. So that's the danger.
Yeah.
When we offload all of our capabilities to these machines, I'll use one more example, and then I'll get off of this. We can get back to farming. This AI system that produces art, that everybody started making all these pictures of themselves the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
So what happens to the art industry? But see, and here's what's fascinating. The AI can never produce anything new, but it can copy everything that's ever been made and make it perfect, however you want it. So what happens in the future where the young artist doesn't become an artist anymore because AI can make better art than him, but then all human innovation in art stops because all AI can do is infinitely re-reference what's already been done. So whether it's art, whether it's farming, whether it's knowledge, all of these computer systems fundamentally come down to the same thing. They can be utilized as brilliant force multipliers, taking yours and mine's ability and turning you and me into whole divisions of creative capabilities, or just capabilities. But if you remove the knowledge of actually how it works, how to make it happen, then you're just setting yourself up for an end scenario where everybody's in a room spelling cat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a very dark feedback loop, but very possible, and I understand exactly what you're saying. And I just recently talked to an artist in the Fargo area that was telling me about that AI and the work that they do in comparison and kind of their thoughts. And yeah, I became very aware of how AI is progressing. And I think I'll bring this back to farming and my own experience, looking at the way farming is developing. I mean, I see a lot of the technologies coming through Grand Farm being associated with AI and being kind of the technological perspective, but what I've learned now as I've gotten more experienced and more intimately entwined with what it takes to develop a controlled environment, what it takes to manage such a situation, that even with the greatest technology available now and as it develops in the future, like the grower having that knowledge base and knowing what's happening is still such an important thing that you can't get around that. And I say that in a way that I am all about the holistic way of producing and all the connectivity to nature. But I also, from an economic standpoint, see the advantages of having, an all-encompassing system that can run my greenhouse operation without me being there. Like, I see that as advantageous in the business environment, but I also see that challenge when the grower doesn't understand what's happening and doesn't have that knowledge base to fall back on if things were to go the other way. And even with that now, I see that even the greatest technologies will never, in this capacity, override what a human can do with their own creativity and the understand of the connectivity of a growing system.
Exactly. Well, in every element, but what reality is a conscious experience that, is an exponential quantum experience. Again, AI can leverage all of that knowledge, but it can't ever produce anything new. And I think that's still what you're talking about, is the human element. The element of the person that's at the center, the creator, the Promethean, they're the ones that are actually calling forth those powers. And so, as a force multiplier, AI is great. Anything else where it's replacing, no, dead end.
So bring it back to Eden.
Sure.
But I guess if you have something specific you want to say about Eden kind of here in the last 10 minutes, my question was just going to be around the customer base that you have now. Like, are they adapting to the vertical systems? Like, is that what they're seeking, or is it still something novel that like they're trying out because it is novel, or are they seeing that as like the means of production and they want to learn how to do it because they see the relevance of that right now?
They don't know what they don't know. And actually the biggest problem I would say right now is on the investor side of things is that indoor farming is kind of going through a crisis, which is normal in industries, in that the dot-com bubble is always the greatest example. Is anytime you see a new business trend happen, you have everyone flood into it. Everyone talks about how it's the future. And it is. Computers were the future. But anytime you have a big new innovation, you have a lot of grifters come in and pollute the space, and you have a lot of people that just want to believe it's going to work without understanding the fundamentals. And so that's what led to the dot-com crash. And I'd say that's what's happening inside next generation indoor farming right now, is we're seeing the industry clear itself out, over and over again. Just today I was reading an article on Wired talking about how vertical farming is collapsing in Europe because energy costs have gone through the roof and the models were so marginal on how much money they could make.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy, and it's validating simultaneously, because Jeff Raymond and I, the real Martian, he and I ascertained this 5 years ago, that we looked at everything and said, they're ignoring the energy aspect of the equation. They're ignoring HVAC. If you ignore energy and you ignore HVAC, you're just selling pipe dreams to people. And
100%.
It blows me away that you have, groups that have raised $90 million, $400 million that have built these spaceship futuristic things that just didn't work.
Yep.
And it's like, I'm flabbergasted over and over again. And I get it. We've talked through it a million times internally. West Coast investors, man, you give them a pretty, and it's changing now because they've gotten burned so badly. But over the last 20 years, Silicon Valley, West Coast investors, if you had a slick presentation and some pretty pictures, chances are you could get investment. I'm in Texas, and I'm dealing with oil and gas guys that all they care about is the bottom line.
Yeah.
All they care about is, how real is this? Don't tell me it's going to be real 5 or 10 years from now. Fine, come back to me in 5 or 10 years and I'll give you money. If you want my money today, you need to show me how I'm going to get my money back in the next 12 months, 4 years, if you're lucky. And so, all this money was leveraged into these operations that were totally futuristic, were aimed in the right direction, but in how they actually performed there was no reality there.
Right.
And so now you see them like just imploding, and these large operations that huge amounts of capital were raised for are shutting down now, or downsizing to significant degrees and they say, well, we have to focus on profitability. Well, you should have been focused on profitability before you were spending $40 million, $90 million, $400 million. I just can't understand what they were thinking in those institutions. The only thing I can think of is that they drank their own Kool-Aid, and they had so many people around them that were so excited about the future and what the potentials, and they all started just listening to each other and drinking each other's Kool-Aid. And so, again, same thing happened in the .com, same thing. Anytime you have an innovation cycle, that's what happens, is it takes off, everybody gets excited, everybody goes everywhere, everybody gets in, a lot of grifters come in, a lot of dreamers come in, then you have a collapse when reality sets in. So right now, reality is setting in, and these operations that were not asking the right questions are all being destroyed because of them. So far, what's happening with Eden is we just keep getting validation. We keep getting shown. Another thing, all of these other groups, they put themselves either in a giant box, 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 square foot facility, or they put themselves in a shipping container. And again, Jeff and I looked at that 4 years ago and said, trying to create one modality and telling everyone that they have to fit in that is insane. We need to take the system out of the box and make it to where it can be modular, scalable, and adaptable so people can utilize it for what they need to utilize it. And instead of trying to go for the centralized Walmart in the center of the city, we need to be going out to all the other places. Jeff famously told me, he says, Sun Tzu, we don't want to go fight where everyone else is fighting. We want to go, and that was our profile from the beginning. Everyone else, again, why we did aeroponics. Everyone else in the industry did hydroponics because it was an easy technology that had been proven, that could be easily leveraged and scaled, and you could put in the center of the city. We were asking a completely different question. We were saying, how do you go out to the middle of nowhere? How do you go out to the end of the supply chain? And how do you make a farming system that utilizes the least amount of human and electrical energy, and O, is turnkey, and O, requires no previous experience in growing to operate? We approached it, that was our problem we were trying to solve. But per our analysis, and of course, we're going to say this, but it is, per our analysis, that was the real problem. It wasn't about making money. these large lettuce operations that are $40 million were just designed to make money. And of course, that makes sense because you want to get investors, you have to do that. But again, even though it's so weird to me because, okay, they went down that pathway saying they wanted to make money and then completely ignored some of the biggest fundamentals. And then just started kind of, I'm not going to name what company it is, but a real popular farm in a box company, their model, they have no HVAC, but on their website, they talk about people in San Francisco and they talk about people in temperate zones with very stable year-long weather that don't have HVAC costs, making a lot of money off their system. But then they sell that same system to someone in Texas, and that person's out of business in the first year because their energy costs are and HVAC costs are so much higher than what it's going to be in San Francisco. So what I've also seen inside the industry, honestly, is a lot of false promises, whether from products. You know, we go and we look at grow tower companies that are photoshopping strawberries and tomatoes into their ads, and you can really easily tell just by looking at them.
Absolutely.
And then you go read on their product reviews on Amazon, and people are saying how pissed they are. You know, so there's just been a lot of false promises and a lot of capitalization on the exuberance and the desire and the need for these kind of technologies. So I would say that's a good and a bad thing. It's a bad thing in that the well is very poisoned right now from a consumer and investor standpoint, but it's a good thing because now people are ready to find real solutions. They want real products. They want to see things that are actually going to work. And that's the core of what we've done at Eden. Our systems work. We can show you how they can work, and we will figure out with you where it's going to work. So I would say that's the difference. But that's where we're at as an industry right now and where Eden's at, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. That is, excuse me, something I know I've talked to you and Jeff about at different times, and why I think it's fascinating. If you go through this process and you set your goal, and you whether it is the right goal from the beginning or not, you're very quickly going to learn that energy is really the industry that you're in, and it's just about balancing that. And from what I'm doing, I'm trying to produce the energy that I need for the highest output and nutrient dense product or crop as possible. But it's really more like I'm in the Department of Energy, and food is just a byproduct of what I'm doing in trying to balance the system.
You're totally right. That is so key, Quinn, and it's a mark of your intelligence. It's true. You know, this is all about energy. It's all about energy, and it's all about how we manage that energy to actually get effective solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think if the consumer understands that, or at least that's kind of part of their reason for wanting a product like this, then they'll, bar none, always are going to go with something like this because they'll see that that's the most crucial part. Well,
the last thing I want to touch on is, you know, I was talking to one of my partners this morning that deals a lot with the energy and water component, and I said, look, if you examine the cycles of history, we know what's happening. We knew what was going to happen. We can see it happening. Now, What is that? It is that the post-World War II system of globalization is falling apart, all right? All of the key pillars that made it possible, cheap labor, continual demographics of having access to cheap labor, access to cheap resources from all over the world, wiring the whole world together that allowed specific areas to specialize in growing specific things and optimize that, the just-in-time system being optimized on top of that, and then the U.S. being willing to safeguard world trade. If you remove any one of the pillars I just talked about, that system doesn't work.
Absolutely.
All of them are failing. All of them are going away, okay? So the rest of our lives, the next 20 years of our lives, is going to be that old system dying.
Yep.
And new water, food, power systems coming online. Ones that will actually work, that will perform the way they need to perform, so that we can transfer from the old system to the new system and still have the prosperity that we've all enjoyed and want for our families and children. So That's what we're living in right now. And as long as we continue to go to the public and educate them and explain to them what's happening and tell them that there are real solutions that don't involve bug paste and cricket meal, that they can have a healthy, happy, prosperous, secure future, that we can actually build better systems that are more ecological, that are more socially just, that are more secure than have ever been built before. So as long as we do our job and go out to the public and explain that to the public, despite everything that everyone says, is not stupid, okay? They're childlike, but they're not stupid, and they know what they want. And so if you explain, and I don't mean that individually, I'm just saying the public, when you're talking to everyone all at once, the group is childlike. So the group can be scared very easily. The group can be inspired very easily. Our job is to show them that there is a true pathway to the future that they want, to that solar symphony, to that world of green fields and green buildings and food abundance everywhere, and the environment being taken care of, and communities being able to self-empower themselves and have self-determination. That's the future we all want. All we have, and the technology exists that is real, that's not bullshit, for us to step by step, as this system disintegrates, transfer into that brighter future. So that is our job, is to get out and continue to educate our communities, give them the tools via the technology and organization so that they can then empower themselves and get through this crisis time and come out on the other end in a new golden age and a new renaissance. That's the promise. Like these dark times in history, you look at the Black Plague created the Italian Renaissance.
Yep.
Right? Anytime we have periods like this in history where everything gets messed up, it's an opportunity. It's not the end of the world, it's the beginning of the new world. And the people that have the passion and the focus and the ability to communicate and go out to everybody and say, hey, the hill's over that way. Let's go to the promised land. People are ready and they want that and they will react to that and they will go to that. So that's how I'd like to close this. That's our mission now at every level, whether it's in Fargo or Houston or on the other side of the planet. It's for us to explain to our friends and neighbors that there is a bright future if we choose it.
Absolutely, Bart. I think that's a great way to wrap it up. And that touches on what I've often said to people is, the pillars that you mentioned are what have created this standard of living that we've all come to know and love. And it would be so much easier if we begin shifting our practices now while that standard of living is, still high and mighty, no matter what the time horizon is for that inevitable change. It's just always easier to do things when life is good. And right now life is good. So let's do it now.
Now we'll wrap it up for this month's episode of Grand Farmer. We want to thank Bart and Quinn for the great conversation. We also want to thank our Grand Farm partners for making this possible. If you enjoy Grand Farmer, be sure to check out our upcoming Cultivate conference on June 8th, where we'll hear from ag tech leaders on the latest from the industry. To learn more about Grand Farm, you can visit our website at grandfarm.com.